Pranav Guha Thakurta from EduTV. Today we have a young dynamic director of one of the prestigious management institutes of India. He is the famous Dr. Rai, Dr. Himanshu Rai. Dr. Himanshu is basically an electrical engineer from REC, Surathkal. He worked for 8.5 years with Tata Steel. Then he decided to shift to academia. He taught at XLRI, Jamshedpur, AIIMS Lucknow. He believes in including Indian ethos and culture in management. He has headed the India campus of S.J. Bakuni School of Management. Dr. Himanshu is the current director of the prestigious IIM Indore that has triple crowns in terms of international accreditations, and they are EQ, UIS, AACSB, and AMBA. Because of these international accreditations, it becomes one of the 90 global B schools in the world. Dr. Himanshu, we have an august gathering of famous principals from India and abroad to hear you on the topic. And the topic is strategizing education and learning from schools to colleges in the current scenario. We are thankful to Dr. Rai as he is over busy and is assisting the local administration of Indore and around for the current crisis. We are very thankful to all the principals and school leaders for taking out time for the subject. Over to you, Dr. Rai.
All right, thank you, Pranav, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon to all of you, and I hope that you all are staying home and staying safe. Of course, I can see Trilok who's driving, and I'm assuming that he's driving for a very, very good reason. Now, I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes, and I'll keep the remaining 10 minutes to actually take the Q&A. And as Pranav pointed out, I'm going to talk about what should you do, but predominantly since it happens to be a group of teachers, I'll probably speak more about what should you do as a teacher rather than what should you do as a student or as a parent. I'll probably just quickly touch upon it so that you can pass on that message to the students as well as to parents. Now, before that, let me set up the context. Why is it important and why did Pranav say transition from school to college? And I'll talk about the pandemic later. And this transition is extremely important simply because we have been doing a lot of studies. So many of you might know that IIM Indore is one of the 90-odd business schools in the world, which has a AAA accreditation of AMBA, AA, CSB, and EQUIS. And we've been attending these deans conferences across the world, around the world, and I've been speaking in a few. And what we have realized is that the workforce that we would require in the future, and by the future, I don't mean a future which is too far away, but something like 2030, is going to be extremely different from the kind of a workforce that we have right now. And why is it going to be different? The first thing is that dreams are going to become a reality. Many of the things which we thought were subject matters of science fiction, etc., are actually becoming a reality. Of course, some of the dreams have turned into nightmares as well, which is the current COVID-19 pandemic, which is a dream turned horribly wrong. And I'm sure that those of you who watched the movie Contagion wouldn't have imagined that you would watch it in real life. And heavens forbid, we wouldn't want to have another replay of this. But a lot of dreams are becoming reality in terms of 3D printing, in terms of robotics, in terms of artificial intelligence. And all of this is possible simply because artificial intelligence is here. Now, most people do not understand the difference between analytics and artificial intelligence. And that is where I want to spend about a minute on. When I talk about data analytics, then we are talking about picking up a large amount of data and then trying to do some analysis out of it. So for example, now you have cameras which are there on the roads, which monitor traffic. And the cameras can tell you as to what is the density of the traffic, and basis that density of the traffic, you can actually make a decision about the traffic signals as to when should a signal go green, when should a signal go red, so on and so forth. And you can also coordinate between multiple signals. But that is only analytics. The artificial intelligence part comes in when your camera also starts differentiating between, say, an animal and a vehicle, and therefore makes a different decision based on an animal crossing the street versus a human being crossing the street. Likewise, it has to make a difference between 2 people sitting on a bike versus 3 people sitting on a bike. But this is happening as we speak. So artificial intelligence is here, whether we like it or not. Of course, some of us are taken over by the movies, and we say, hey, we don't want that kind of future. But whether we want that kind of a future or not, it is here for us to actually adapt to, whether we like it or not. The third thing is, and this is pertinent to teachers, is that we are moving towards an auto-directed world. Please remember, our role changed from a teacher to a facilitator a long time back. So no longer is teacher sitting on this exalted position on a raised platform and then speaking and then assuming that gyan flows from this end to the other. Now we are facilitators of learning, which means that we also acknowledge that there is an equal amount of knowledge and wisdom, if not more, on the other side, and we also have to help disseminate and collate that particular wisdom which is within the students who we are teaching. But increasingly now we are moving towards an auto-directed world, which means that the students are going to choose what are the methods by virtue of which they wish to learn. How are they going to consume the educational material? So for example, another latest research has actually shown that within 3 years, close to 60% of the educational material will be consumed in the audio-visual form. Which means any day, whatever we are being forced to do today because of the pandemic has actually become a reality, which means we have to go online. And the fourth thing, which is important, is that people matter. Despite machines taking over a lot of our jobs, despite robotics coming here, ultimately human beings will matter for the simple reason that we have the intelligence and the wherewithal to actually feel and connect. And which is why, although Elon may talk about driverless cars, but it is very difficult going ahead to even be thinking in terms of driverless cars, simply because of the ethical questions that need to be answered. Which is, what does the car do in case a person comes in front of it versus say 5 animals come in front of it, so on and so forth. So there are multiple ethical questions which need to be answered, and those can be answered by human beings only. And therefore, in this entire context, what we have realized is that there are these 10 skills which are going to be the skills of the future, and this is what the colleges are gearing up for, and this is what as schools you should be gearing up for, to provide inputs into these 10 schools, or the foundations into these 10 skills. Now these are complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. Now, if you look at these 10 skills, you will realize that very few of them have actually got something to do with what we term as hardcore technical stuff. Why? Because most of the technical stuff is going to be taken over by the machines. So there was a time when we had to do the calculations, we would write everything down and then do a paper and pencil kind of a calculation. In fact, we used to remember the tables as well, the multiplication tables. Pahade yaad karwaye jate the. But subsequently now, I mean, much to my horror, I realize that people, even if they have to make an addition of 132 plus 200, they actually take out their calculators instead of actually doing it mentally, or by actually writing it down. They use a calculator or their phone calculators, etc., to do all of that, which means that increasingly we are becoming dependent on machines to do all of these kinds of jobs. But nonetheless, there are certain things which are not going to get delegated to machines, and they will have to be done by human beings. For example, critical thinking. What do I mean by critical thinking? You see, all of these elements are elements of knowledge. And as principals, you must understand that knowledge itself has 3 categories. And by the categories, I don't mean that there are multiple kinds of knowledges in terms of subject matters, but I'm talking about the ontological concept of knowledge. So knowledge has 3 components within itself. One is called the declarative component. The declarative component of knowledge is the knowledge that you need to remember. So for example, a lawyer needs to remember the entire penal code. A doctor needs to remember the entire procedures which are to be conducted. Likewise, there are certain elements in every subject that you will need to remember. For example, a lawyer can't stop a judge and say, hey, hang on, judge, let me go check on the internet and tell you which precise penal code does this refer to? No, you need to mug it up by heart. So this is something that needs to be mugged up by heart. That is a declarative component of knowledge. The second is the procedural component of knowledge, which means how will this knowledge be used? And how will this knowledge be used? Meaning that, let's say I know how to make a cut. How will I make this cut precisely as a doctor? From which part of the body to what part of the body? Likewise, if I'm negotiating, how am I going to negotiate? Am I going to negotiate across the table, sitting opposite to each other? Or am I going to negotiate sitting next to each other, so on and so forth? So what is the process that will be applied to actually implement that knowledge? And the third component of knowledge is called the strategic component knowledge, which means when will this knowledge be useful? So when will I apply a certain procedure? Under what circumstances will I apply a certain procedure? And therefore, what you have to understand as principles is that now when you're talking about taking education to another level altogether, you will have to look at each of your courses that are taught in your schools, divide them into these three components of knowledge. Why? Because each of these three components of knowledge can be taught through different methods. For example, a declarative component of knowledge can be taught through a lecture method. So you can purely give a lecture, this is it, and people can mug up, or it can also be given as a self-study. Now, in the times of the pandemic, the declarative component of knowledge can be given out by providing e-material, e-learning material. So all you need to do is send out the e-learning material to students and then take a quiz based on whatever preparation that they have done. But when it comes to the process element, the procedural element of the knowledge, then you'll have to make sure that you have something like a video material which is available. Because what you're trying to tell is a procedure or a process. And likewise, you may want to do a Zoom meeting or use some kind of a learning management system by virtue of which you can take the student through different categories of those processes. And when it comes to the strategic component of the knowledge, you probably need to use case studies. So you need to make multiple caselets, or you need to make multiple situational write-ups and say, okay, in this particular situation, what is the process that you're going to use? And in that particular process, what are the things that you have mugged up or the things that you have memorized? So this is the way to go about so far as the knowledge is concerned. But please remember that any element of human development in terms of academia, again, has three parts, just like knowledge has three parts. So knowledge is one of those three parts. The second part is skill, and the third part is attitude. And if you look at these 10 skills that I have spoken about that will be required post the fourth industrial revolution, most of these 10 skills need a solid component of skill and attitude as well. So for example, negotiation is a skill. You will need to teach people how to negotiate, and negotiation or any of the skills are best taught through simulation methods. And therefore, probably you will have to ask your teachers to build some simulations or games through which these skills can be actually taught. And finally, the last part is attitude, which is the most difficult to teach, and especially in an online kind of system, because attitude is something which takes time to develop. Now, here, even psychology goes a little against us for the simple reason that but it goes against us, not against you all. And by us, I mean teachers in the college, and by you, I mean teachers predominantly in the schools. And why? Because psychology says that by and large, people, when they reach an age of 20 or so, their ideologies and beliefs become fixed, and then it becomes very difficult to change them. So we have a more difficult job when it comes to actually attitude changing. But you have a more critical job, because if the job is done well at the end of the schools, then it makes our life far more easier. And therefore, one of the things that I've always acknowledged with utmost humility is that, I find it extremely easy to teach a bunch of MBA students, but I find it extremely difficult to teach anybody who's below the age of, say, 14 or 15, because I have absolutely no idea as to what do I do if I can't get through to them. Now, this is where I think the role of teachers, especially primary teachers, primary school teachers, becomes extremely critical. Now, what do you do when you have to shift everything because of the pandemic? I would recommend, 2, 3 things over the next the final 5 minutes. A very interesting study which has come out recently by AACSB, which is one of the accrediting agencies of the US. It says that the percentage of faculty who are willing to adapt to this transition from offline, from in class to online, is higher than the number or the percentage of students who are willing to adapt from in class to online. Now, this is very, very surprising. It's almost counterintuitive, because even intuitively, I would have thought that it's going to be far more difficult for my faculty to transition rather than my students to transition. But as it turns out, the things that I'm getting, the feedback that I'm getting from my students, because my campus is closed. So all my students are now back homes, and we have shifted completely to online mode to finish off at least our undergraduate part. And what I'm getting students increasingly from the students are several problems. Now, some of those problems are related to attitude, which means that they simply don't want to do it. And, I don't really blame them, for the simple reason that I've seen a lot of my colleagues also struggle with similar stuff. So once you start working from home, there is a sense of lethargy which sets in. You tend to postpone everything, thinking that you have all the time in the world. But what you don't realize is that the moment you let go of that discipline, the moment your waking time instead of 6 a.m. Happens to be 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., everything starts getting postponed. So one of the things that you need to do is you need to constantly communicate with your students. And you need to make sure that the kind of timings that you maintain in your school, when the school was on and in class, the same timings you should maintain when it is online. And this is extremely important. The second important thing that as a teacher you must realize is that please remember, online teaching is a different pedagogical tool. You cannot use the same system, same method, and same material or the same PowerPoint that you use in your classroom to actually go online, because a lot of it will not be useful, number one. Number two, the amount of time which you spend in a classroom hour is much more than the amount of time that you will get to spend in an online mode. By that, what I mean is, whatever in class, if you had a 1 hour worth of material which you could deliver in a classroom mode, you will probably be able to deliver only half of it in an online mode. Why? Because there are frequent disturbances. Students are still not very well adapted to the technology. Somebody might be speaking while you're speaking. You might have to mute, unmute. You might have to answer some questions. There might be power outages. And the moment there's a power outage, if you don't have a direct connection, and if you have a Wi-Fi connection, your Wi-Fi goes away, so on and so forth. So you have to actually factor in all of these elements while you're taking the online sessions. And the third important thing is, make sure that you tell your students that they should have a fixed space, a fixed table and a chair, which is ergonomically designed for them to sit on. And likewise, when you are taking a session, you should have a fixed chair and a table. And you must get used to it, just like you get used to working in an office or something. And make sure that wherever you are sitting, your background has to be something which is unobtrusive. I mean, I haven't been able to figure out a great background yet, simply because there are not too many places here which have ample light. But otherwise, I've managed to get a background which has the painting of a logo. But when I do some things from outside, from my home, then I use a wallpaper. So Zoom, for example, also allows you to use a wallpaper, which will permanently show behind you. Likewise, you can use something which reminds the students of your school. So maybe a picture from the school, maybe something, or maybe you can ask one of your teachers to create some kind of a wallpaper. So this is so far as the elements are concerned. And one of the things that I would recommend to all the teachers, and this is something that you can also discuss with students as well as the parents, is that this is a very, very good time for everyone to bond as a family and to come together as a community. So instead of thinking that you are cooped or you are locked down with somebody, and a lot of people say that, hey, it must be one happy family, but we all know, at least most of the adults, we know that it may not be one happy family which is locked down. I may not love my partner so much, or I may not love somebody in my family so much to be able to take him or her for 24 hours all the time. However, having said that, I think it's also a very good time for us to know each other better, which normally we don't tend to. I mean, we talk about superficial things, but now that we have the time to, and specifically, I'm not talking about partners here, that may get a little dicey, but perhaps it would be a better idea, a good opportunity for you to know your children better, for you to know your students better, for the children to know their parents better, for the children to know their teachers better. And therefore try to build a sense of community. And one of the ways of doing it is having a lot of group assignments, and group assignments which are not just curricular, not just academic, but also extracurricular. So for example, share with them as to what is it that you're doing for your community. So if you have taken some initiative, let's say providing food to the underprivileged people around your community, around your locality, talk about that to the students, because they in turn might be doing something which would be useful for you. And this creates some kind of a bonding with each other. So these are some of my suggestions. And finally, I would like to sign off before I actually leave it open for questions. This is also the time for all of you to actually ask this question: who are you really? Now, this is a deeper philosophical question. Why? Because the moment you say, who are you? I'm talking about you to figure out what your true identity is. For example, if you ask me, and like Pranav introduced me, he said, this is Himanshu, the director of IIM Indore. And if I come across as a director of IIM Indore during these pandemic times, during these times where everybody is looking for everybody's support, in that case, please remember that this introduction or this identity of mine is a very superficial identity. Why? Because this identity is linked to a position that I hold. Now, more often than not, what happens is that if at all we become too carried away by the position that we hold, we also start attaching our sense of self-respect and self-esteem to that position. Don't fall into that trap, because please remember, if you get into that trap, the day that position goes, so will your sense of self-respect and self-esteem. I know it's very difficult, very different, when it comes to school principals, but it's a very natural and normal phenomenon for us. So my tenure is that of 5 years, of which I've completed 1 year and 4 months. So which means I have another 3 years and 8 months to go. And after that, I'll cease to be a director. I'll go back to becoming a professor. And therefore, if I start associating my sense of self-worth with my designation, I will lose my sense of self-worth after 3 years and 8 months. And this is my suggestion to all of you. This is not the time for you to think about yourself as the principal, as a vice principal. Go to the second level of identity. So if somebody who's close to me asks me, who are you? I say, I'm a teacher, or I say, I'm a mountaineer, because these are the two things from where I actually draw my passion from. These are the two things that I'm passionate about. These are the two things from where I draw my inspiration from. And therefore, what you have to realize in the times of these pandemic is that irrespective of the designation that you may hold, you are a teacher. And by teacher, I don't mean that you're a teacher just to your students, but this is a time for you to teach others as well. So Pranav was talking about some of the motivational videos I took out. I mean, I did it on the request of the doctors in Indore, and then on the request of the police in Indore. And now the Central Government Employee Association has written to me. But in fact, this is something that I should have done by myself. So clearly, there was something that I did not do. I should have thought of it that here are other people as well who need a word of encouragement given these very, very difficult times. And therefore, what you must remember that as a teacher, your responsibility lies not merely towards the students, but it also lies towards the parents and towards a larger community as well. Right. So towards the end, what I'll say is that while you're communicating with your students, make sure that you're also communicating to the parents. Make sure that you're also communicating to a wider community, talking about what they should do to make the lives of students easier, of children easier, and also how to better and strengthen the bond between the parents and the students, and between the teachers and the students, and between the institute or the school and the students. All right. So thank you very much for all this time. And sorry, I took a little extra time. I got a little carried away by that entire philosophical element of my talk.
Dr. Himanshu, on behalf of Edu Television and all the school principals, would like to thank you for taking out time and enriching us. Thanks a ton, sir.